Hey guys, today I'm going to be giving you a little bit of a more detailed video on how I paint skin in Infinite Painter. As always, I am using my Samsung Galaxy Tab S6 tablet to draw everything in this video. Just going to be going over a little bit more tips on skin tones and how to create them in a stylistic and a little bit more realistic way. If you want to check out part 1 of this video, just lightly detailing how I paint skin tones. Anyway, we're going to start with the color of the skin. Don't be afraid to use many different colors on one skin tone, because skin is made of multiple different colors. If you look at it close enough, there's specks of purple, blue, green, as well as the normal pinks and peaches or browns or tans or whatever the base skin tone color is you're using. But anyway, I'm going to start with 3 base skin tone templates here. I have a dark skin tone, a medium skin tone, and a light skin tone. Now we'll start on the medium skin tone first, just because it's a good mid-range tone compared to the other two. This is just for the color, kind of the theories and concepts behind how I color skin. But I'm going to start with a blushy color, a peachy pink. Depending on what color you're using for the base skin tone, whether it's warmer or cooler, you might want to change the warmness or coolness of that blush color. But just a nice, vibrant, peachy pink is usually good for a blush color. And I usually set my brush opacity at least 50% or lower, just to be able to apply it very lightly. And I'm putting that blush color not only on the cheeks, but also around the eyes and sometimes on the nose, and later I'll put it on the ear as well. That's not necessary, but it sometimes adds a nice blushed effect to the face. And now to add a shading color, you're not going to go straight down as you see here or straight diagonally to a more vibrant shaded color. You're going to want to add a little bit more red or purpley pink to it. You can go further down for a more cool effect, or just slightly down for a little bit of a cooler effect. But usually in the shade, it is going to be a little bit cooler and a little bit more red toned, depending on the lighting, of course. But I'm just going to add that under the neck here. And you can see how that slightly redder tone to it gives a real richness to the shading. And I'm going to be adding that blush color onto the ears, like I said before. Then going back to that shading color and continuing to shade. And I'm penning it in as if it was contour makeup on her face. Also adding it under the eyes here. And you can see that warm color, like I said, really adds nice dimension and life to the skin tone. Now, this is just a cartoon style example of how to do this, but that's just because it has thick line art. You could definitely apply these techniques to a more realistic style for sure, like I'll show you later. And you can also take that same shading tone and use it for the lips too, if you wanted a more neutral colored lip. But if you want to add a little bit more pink or mauve, then that might look a little bit more natural and less neutral, if that makes sense. And just taking lighter and darker shades of that to create the shading on the lips. And you'll notice I'm color picking everything from that skin tone to try and match it to it, so that the colors aren't so far off that they blend in a muddy way. And then I'm just adding the highlights with a slightly lighter shade that's a little bit more on the golden end. And that's the completed coloring for the medium skin tone. And now I'm just going to go to the dark skin tone and apply those same exact techniques to show you how this can be used on basically any skin tone. I'm just taking that peachy color and adding it to the cheeks and blending it in very softly, and then making that shaded color for the neck there. And I'm just doing the same thing I did before. And you can change the variation on the colors you use for your shadings and highlights, depending on the environmental light that's around you. But just for a basic understanding, I'm doing it very simply here. And then also for darker skin tones, I've noticed a lot of the times natural darker skin toned lips will be pigmented in a non-uniform way. Lighter skin tones have this too. If you look really closely, it's just more noticeable on darker skin tones. And not everybody's lips look like that. It's just some people's. So it's something interesting to experiment with if you wanted to. And now we're going over to the lighter skin tone and doing the same thing. And I'm using a little bit of a cooler pink on the cheeks there, since this light skin tone is a little bit cooler. I wanted to show a variation in cool and warm tones. And since her skin is lighter, I'm adding that blush on the neck as well, because on lighter skin tones, you're going to see blushy areas a little bit more easily than on darker skin tones because of the lack of pigment. And you can just see that taking these same steps on all these skin tones kind of achieves the same type of result, but with different colored skin. And they are uniquely colored skins too. They aren't muddy looking or one-dimensional. They have a decent amount of life in them for just being two-dimensional cartoon style drawings. So this is some advice to consider. Also something to consider is the texture that you place on your drawing. Here I'm adding some freckles and little blemishes and stuff like that, and adding creases on the skin is really important too. Skin isn't going to be perfectly smooth, so add in those imperfections. Here, for example, I'm adding in little dots for the pores, and then on her face, I'm going to be adding the representation of vitiligo, which is a skin condition where patches of your skin have a lack of pigment in them. And then for this, you would just change the shading in those spots to match that skin pigment. So that's another interesting idea. You can see I've added different textures on their faces, which gives each one a unique appearance. And more on textures here, adding in imperfections, like I said before, is really important. You see here on this picture that I did in my last skin tutorial video, the scar is a prominent feature on her and it looks very interesting. It's very important to keep texture in mind. You want to show every crease and wrinkle that you can where it needs to be. If I didn't put any creases underneath this eye while I'm painting it, then it would look too smooth and wouldn't really look like an eyelid, because eyelids move and they crease where they bend, right? So you have to add in those little divots and indentations and creases and pockmarks and blemishes and zits and freckles and veins and every little thing that's on the skin. It doesn't have to be super detailed. You can see here when I zoom into this in a minute here, the detail that I put on this is pretty simplistic and rough looking, and when you zoom in on it, it kind of looks like finger painting mess. It's not detailed at all, but it doesn't matter because when you zoom out, there's texture. That's the main thing that matters. When you're drawing the highlight on the skin there, I just put a little bit of specks of white there and a little bit of darker specks for the pores. You don't have to draw them all over the face because that's not what it looks like in real life. You only notice the pores in certain areas where the light reflects off of them, if that makes sense. So just accentuate certain areas with that texture. Don't go too overboard, but don't neglect texture either, because skin is never perfectly smooth. That's obviously if you're going for a more realistic look, texture is more important, but it's still nice to add on cartoon style. Also keep in mind, like I said before, to use a variety of color when you're adding little veins and marks like that. Make sure you add little tinges of purple and blue and green in them, because when you look close, those colors are under our skin. And now the next important thing I'm going to be talking about is lighting and how it affects our skin and how it penetrates through our skin. There's something called subsurface scattering, which is an event that happens when light penetrates through our skin cells. So if light was coming from those red arrows, and then a reflection light from the environment was coming from those blue arrows, you can see the colors are bouncing off the sides of the skin here, right? Well, that light also passes through the center here, through the edge of the skin, and creates a little bit of glow in your skin. Rather than it just passing around the edge like a normal object, your skin actually diffuses the light within itself, so it causes a little portion of your skin to glow. So if the light was coming from behind your object like this, the shaded area would be towards you, and the subsurface scattering would show a glow around the edges of your skin, like that. So if I were to draw a hand like this, I can show you how it would be lit from behind and how the light would react through the skin. I'm just using my hand as a reference for this, holding it up to the light from a window. And you can do this at home as a little experiment just to study how skin looks and study how you can draw it. Just draw your hand with a strong backlight behind it, and you'll see a little bit of a red glow around your fingertips. And that is subsurface scattering. That is the light penetrating through your skin cells. It's pretty cool, but it's a unique feature of skin that not many other materials in nature have. And it makes skin look very uniquely full of life and bouncy and resilient. And that is something that you might want to consider when coloring skin, especially if there's a strong light source. You're going to want to add in a little bit of that pinky glow where the light just caresses the edge of the skin. Something to take note of for sure. And another thing that I concentrate on when I'm painting skin is how the skin flows and reacts to the light based on how the skin folds around the other parts of the body. Like, for example, the lips here. You'll see that the skin above the lips flows and swoops around the lips. I take note of the direction of how they move, how the shading and how the light sources glide down the edges of them. It's very important. You always want to be very conscious of where your light source is and how it affects your objects, especially skin. And obviously all these techniques can be used in color, but as you can see here, it is possible to make black and white gradients look like skin if you add the right shine and specularity and light reaction onto it. Just as long as you're using those values correctly and making them lighter or darker in the corresponding areas where the color would be, the shading should be convincing enough to create that bounce and spring and specularity of real skin. And it's possible to do this in digital painting as well as any type of painting or drawing, as long as you follow the basic rules of how value reacts to light. But as always, a lot of these things come with time and practice and a lot of patience and determination. So the first thing you got to do is start. But thanks for joining, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it was helpful. And if you have any suggestions for new videos for me, please let me know. And if you liked this video, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more. Bye, guys.